Shall we start? Yes. Good evening. Online, good evening. Hope it is audible, visible. Yes. Now we'll be discussing about this week's current affairs. Now which all current affairs were in news in this week? The most important one. Now which all the topics were in news in this week? First. Now which all topics were in news in this week? Now the first and foremost, the topic which was in news in this week, we call it as the Colombo security dialogue was in news. Now what is this Colombo security dialogue? Why it was in news? Why this was in news? Colombo security dialogue. Now the first and foremost news here is, now who was the host country? Now India was the host country, the first one. And the second one, in this host country, a new member has been added. And that new member we call it what? The Seychelles. The new member we call it as the Seychelles. The most important topic, you can expect a question on this, because India is the host country for this year's, we call it as the 7th edition of the Colombo Security Dialogue. Highly important one, you can expect a question on this. And the second major important topic. Now while discussing about this topic, we will talk about the majorly. Now we'll talk about the Colombo Security Dialogue, and we'll also talk about the topic called as the Seychelles. One by one we'll see that. And the second major important, the topic which was in news in this week, we call it as the labor codes came into effect. Now what is this labor codes? Now how many labor codes were present with respect to, we call it as, in India, and which came into effect this week? There are 4 important labor codes. One we call it as code on, we call it as what? The code on wages 2019. And the second one we call it as the code on social security. The code on social security, code on we call it as industrial relations. The code on we call it as occupational safety. The second most important topic from your exam point of view, that we call it as the labor codes. Now while discussing about this labor codes, we will talk about the most important one, we call it as what is labor codes and how our constitution is providing us the rights with respect to the labors. And what is this all about? What is this code on, we call it as the wages 2019, and the code on we call it as the social security, code on industrial relations. The code on we call it as occupational safety, in the year we call it as 2020. We'll see all the things one by one. You can expect a question from this too, at least one this year. And the third major important one, the news from this week. The major important one we call it what? It is majorly we call it as G20 was in news, IPSA was in news. The G20 was in news, IPSA was in news, the reports are in news, the different reports related to, we call it as climate change reports was in news, and the report on, we call it as TB was in news. Expected question this year, all those things was. Now all this are highly important one. Now we'll see all those things. At least this report is highly important. Because what is the target of India with respect to elimination of TB? TB Mukt Bharat. Now which year was? Now that is this year, 2025. Now 2025, are we able to achieve that? We'll see all those things one by one. And after this we'll also talk about the topic called as BIRSA 101. What is this BIRSA 101? It is, we call it as, it's a medicine or it's a gene editing tool which has been, it is developed with respect to, we call it as what? Sickle cell anemia. Now what is the target with respect to sickle cell anemia? It is 2047 on the eve of 100, or I can say on the eve of 100th year of, we call it as the independence, the 101. And this year we are also celebrating 150th anniversary of Birsa Munda. That we'll see. And we'll also talk about this week. We'll also talk about the president and governor related topic. The most important one. Now related to Article 200 and related to Article 201. We'll see all the things in a comprehensive manner one by one year. Yes. Now shall we start now? Yes. Now first one we call it as, the first topic we call it as what? The Colombo Security Conclave or Colombo Security Dialogue. Now first and foremost one, I have already said that whenever we are discussing about the current affairs, what should be our first one? The first one is the news. The first one, now why it was the news? Now I have already said that there are two important news here. Now which is the two important news? Online, what is the two important news here? Yes, we'll see all the things one by one. Just be active. Now we'll see all the things one by one, at least some 25 to 30 topics we'll cover in this week. Now first one, the news here is, now the Colombo Security Conclave or Colombo Security Dialogue, which was hosted by which country? Hosted by, we call it as India. Now majorly at the level of, we call it as National Security Advisor. At the level of National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. Now this was being hosted by India. In the 7th, we call it as Colombo Security Conclave, the new member has been added. And which is that new member? The new member, we call it as the Seychelles has been joined as a new member. The Seychelles has been joined as a new member. We'll see that. Now who was the guest? It was guest appearance, and who was the guest member, and we'll see all the things one by one as a part of this part. Done? Now shall we see that one by one? Now the first one, give a ding called as, what is this Colombo Security Dialogue or Colombo Security Conclave all about? When was this established? First one, this Colombo Security Conclave, which was established in which year? In the year 2011. In the year 2011, by involving 3 members. It was a trilateral services. Now which is the trilateral services? Now it was the 3 member countries which joined hands with, it was 3 countries to integrate as a Colombo Security Conclave. Now which is the 3 countries? Now that 3 countries which includes India, second one which includes Sri Lanka, which includes which one? Maldives. Now the 3 founding countries of this Colombo Security Dialogue was 3 countries. It is India, and second one was our Sri Lanka, and the third one we called as what? Maldives. Now why it is called as Colombo Security Dialogue? Because this decision took place in a place in Sri Lanka, we call it as, which is that place? Colombo. Yes or no? We'll see all the things one by one. Just give me some 5 or 10 minutes, I'll discuss all the things. Second, now what is the objective of this Colombo Security Dialogue? What's the objective? Now the Colombo Security Dialogue, it was a trilateral services between the 3 countries, majorly to enhance the security in the Indian Ocean region. Majorly to enhance what? Majorly to enhance, we call it as the security. Majorly to enhance security in which region? Now majorly in Indian Ocean region. Majorly in, we call it as Indian Ocean region. We'll see all those 360 degree about all the things, just 5 minutes. Now security with respect to Indian Ocean region. Now which countries are the founding members? The founding members are India, Sri Lanka and Maldives. And later on 3 countries has joined this conference, joined this conclave, joined this Colombo Security Dialogue. Now which is that? 3 countries which has joined later on as a part of, we call it as Colombo Security Dialogue. Now the 3 countries has been joined. Now which is that 3 countries? Now in the year 2022. In the year 2022, a country has been joined. In the year 2024, a country has been joined. In the year 2025, it is one more country has been joined. That is nothing but this year, a new country has been added. Last year, a new country has been added. In the year 2022, a new country has been added. Which is that? The major one, we call it as, in the year 2022, a Mauritius has been added. And that we call it as Mauritius. Mauritius has been added as which country? New country in the year 2022. I'll discuss all those things. At least one point about the current affairs. Second one, in the year 2024, Bangladesh has been added as a new member. Bangladesh has been added as which member? The new member of this organization, online exactly yes, highly important. And that 2025, this year a new country has been added, and that we call it as what? It is Seychelles. That we call it as the Seychelles has been added as a new country. My simple question is, now as of today, how many countries are a part of, we call it as the Colombo Security Conclave? Now 6 countries. Now which is the 6th country? It is, we call it as Seychelles. Yes or no, done boss? Now who was the guest member? Who was the guest country? Now the guest country was, we call it as, the guest country, we call it as Malaysia. Malaysia was a part of, we call it as guest country. Be cautious, it's not observer country, guest. They'll come and they'll escape. And that countries we call it as Malaysia. Such countries we call it as Malaysia as a part of what? Guest country. Okay now. Now this at least 5 points you should be aware with respect to, we call it as Colombo Security Conclave. First you should know about when it has been established, how many countries were a part of, we call it as the founding members, and the third one we got objectives, security in the Indian Ocean region, and the fourth one we call it as how many countries were being involved as a part of, we call it as a part of, we call it as this countries. Now sir, other than this, now the first and foremost one here is, what is the uniqueness about, we call it as 7th Colombo Security Conclave, which was hosted by India? What was the importance or what was the uniqueness about, we call it as the Colombo Security Conclave hosted by India? Now the first and foremost one, now this 7th one has been or was being hosted by which country? It is India. Now they are talking about the comprehensive focusing upon the national security, and we call it as security in the Indian Ocean region. Sir, which is that security they are targeting as a part of, we call it as Indian Ocean region? Which is that security? They are focusing upon, we call it as, it is comprehensive security which includes cyber security. They are focusing upon which security? Cyber security. Not only general security, they are also focusing upon digital security also. And along with these things, they are also focusing upon, we call it as HADR also. What is HADR? Humanitarian and disaster relief operations. Humanitarian and disaster relief operations, we call it as developmental operations. As a part of this Colombo security itself, we are supporting the HADR assistance even to Sri Lanka also, even to Bangladesh also, even to Seychelles, Mauritius, even to the African countries also. The reason is, it is to enhance the security. Along with these things, we are going for cooperation among, we call it as different countries also. Cooperation among the different countries of Indian Ocean region. And that was the objectives of, we call it as 7th Colombo Security Conclave. Yes or no? Now is this part, the first one, the basic part, is it clear? Now if it is clear, now a little bit information about, we call it as the Seychelles. Now give a heading called as Seychelles. First one, give a heading called as Seychelles. We call it as the Seychelles. Now when we are discussing about, we call it as Seychelles. Be cautious, whenever you are discussing about the mapping part, you should know about which one? The location. Where is Seychelles? Observe, where is Seychelles? Now it's a part of Indian Ocean. Now it is a part of which continent? African continent. Be cautious, though, observe this, Seychelles. Seychelles, it is present in which ocean? Indian Ocean. But it's a part of which continent? We call it as African continent. First one. Yes or no? Second one, it's a island country. It is, we call it as island country. Now what do you mean by island? What do you mean by island? First, island means it is a land which is surrounded by what? Water on all the sides. Now it is an island and it's also coral island also. What do you mean by coral island? It is, now it has been created by a coral reefs. It's a symbiotic relationship between it is algae, and we call it as the major, we call it as coral reef or the coral polyp. It's a symbiotic relationship between it is zooxanthellae and a coral reef, and that creation we call it as the coral island. Second one done. Third one, the third major important one. Now what is the capital of this Seychelles? What is the capital? Perfect. The capital is, we call it as Victoria. The capital we call it as Victoria. The capital we call it as Victoria. Third one. The fourth one. Fourth one, what is the climate we can experience? What is the climate we can experience with respect to the Seychelles? It is equatorial type of climate, or we call it as evergreen type of climate. Now what do you mean by evergreen type of climate? It is evergreen type of climate means it is there is no fixed tenure with respect to shedding up of the leaves, or we call it as the high temperature followed by high precipitation or high rainfall, and that's the objective of, or that's the climatic conditions of, we call it as the complete Seychelles. You should know about four things. One, we call it as location of the complete, we call it as a country. Second one, you should know about it is created by what manner. And the third one, you should know about the capital. And the fourth one, the climatic conditions or the features. Yes or no, boss? And this you should know about the complete, the aspect about, we call it as a country called as the Seychelles. Done? Now other than this, we will discuss about little bit information about it is all the things. Now coming back to, we call it as it is little bit information about all the country. Now first and foremost one, it is coming to India. Now India has announced that we will be organizing 2026 major, we call it as IPCA summit. Now with respect to India, that 2026, that is next year, IPCA summit will be hosted by which country? India. What is IPCA? It is International Big Cat Alliance. We'll see that also. Second, now coming to Sri Lanka. Now India has we call it as a base. India has a base in, we call it as Ambantotta. Ambantotta airspace has been given to India. Recently, it is Ambantotta. That Totta airbase has been given to which country? India. And second one, there is a disputed island between India and we call it as Sri Lanka, and that island we call it as Kalachakra Island. And recently we have inaugurated a Pamban Bridge, the Pamban Bridge between India and Sri Lanka. That you should be aware. It is second one we call it as, it is Kalachakra Island. Kalachakra Island between which country? India and Sri Lanka. At least that you should be aware. Now what's the capital of Sri Lanka? It is Sri Jayawardhanepura. It's not Colombo. Yes or no? It is Sri Lanka's capital is Sri Jayawardhanepura. Highly important. And the third one with respect to Maldives. Recently we have discussed about Maldives. Boycott Maldives. Boycott Maldives. Now majorly boycott Maldives, and the second one we call it as intergenerational ban on tobacco. Intergenerational ban on tobacco. The first country to do that is Maldives. First country. And second one you should also know about, it is Maldives is submerging, and the distance between the sea and we call it as, the depth we call it as hardly 1.5 meters. That you should be aware. And fourth one, the fourth one we call it as the Mauritius. Now recently in Mauritius, we have opened the first JAC center. Now which is the JAC? Jan Aushadhi Kendra outside India. Jan Aushadhi Kendra outside India has been inaugurated at where? Mauritius. Has been inaugurated at, we call it as Mauritius. Capital called as Port Louis. Mauritius capital we call it as Port Louis. Now the first JAC center outside India has been inaugurated at, we call it as Mauritius, by our foreign minister called as S. Jaishankar. by S. Jaishankar. He has inaugurated the first JAC center in Mauritius. That you should be aware. The next one, exactly online, the first Janaushadhi center. The next one we call it as, which was the port which got an access to India in Mauritius? Now, which is the first one which has got an access in, we call it as Mauritius. That we call it as Agalega Island. Agalega Island, India got an access. Agalega Island, India got an access at where? It is Agalega. Agalega Island and a port which got an access to India as a part of military port. As a part of military port, that you should be aware. And the next one you should be aware about, little bit information about Bangladesh. Now, who was the presidency, or which country is the presidency for? It is BRICS Summit. The BRICS Summit as well as BIMSTEC Summit, majorly. Now with respect to BIMSTEC Summit, BIMSTC, what is this BIMSTEC? Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral and Technical and Economic Cooperation. Now for the next 2 years, who is the presidency? Bangladesh. You should be aware. Yes or no? Highly and highly important one. Now which country, or I can say which port has gotten access to India from Bangladesh? Highly important. And the second one, now which is the Muslims which are present in Bangladesh? Now majorly we call it as Rohingya Muslims. The Rohingya Muslims, now they are settled in where? Bangladesh, from Myanmar. From Myanmar, it is, they are present in Bangladesh. And you should also know about the temporary government. And recently, it is Sheikh Hasina has been sentenced for 21 years of, we call it as the jail, and death penalty also. That you should be aware. And the next one, you should also know about the Seychelles. Now Seychelles, we have discussed. Now which is the port which got an access to India? And that we call it as Assumption Island. That we call it as, which island? Assumption Island. Assumption Island. Online, exactly you should be aware. BIMSTEC recently took place in, we call it as Thailand. But for the next 2 years, who will be the presidency? Bangladesh. And that you should be aware. First, Janaushadhi, the tobacco, yes. Yes, yes. Done? Now this is all about the first topic called as, which one? The majorly Colombo Security Conclave or Colombo Security Dialogue. Done? Okay. Solve this. There are traps, you should identify the traps. What's the name of this? Okay. Now, which of the following are incorrect? Now, first one, consider the following statement regarding Colombo Security Conclave. The Colombo Security Conclave was originally established in which year? 2011 as a trilateral maritime security mechanism now between India, Sri Lanka and Maldives. Yes or no? Second one, Seychelles became a 6th full-time member of the Colombo Security, the conclave, yes. But Malaysia participated as observer or as a guest? Yes. As a guest. For the first time during 7th, we call it as New Delhi in 2025. Now, half is correct, half is incorrect. If that's the case, it is incorrect. The Bangladesh was the first country to join. Is the first country to join the Bangladesh? No, it is Mauritius. Mauritius was the first country to join. After the 3 countries, the 4th country was Mauritius. And after that it is Bangladesh, and after Bangladesh we call it a recent one, we call it as Seychelles. If that is the case, even the third option is also incorrect, and answer is what? The 2 and 3. The incorrect we call it as 2 and 3. The answer is we call it as B. I hope this part is clear. Done. Now sir, now before discussing this, now we will talk about which is the security initiatives taken up by India in Indian Ocean region. Which are security initiatives taken up by India now in Indian Ocean region to increase the Indian Ocean region? It is the first and the foremost one we call it as, it is to counter the string of pearls. To counter the string of pearls, India has launched an operation called as. Now which is that operation? It is the operation we call it as, it is necklace of diamond. To counter we call it as the string of pearl. Now which is that country which has launched the string of pearl concept? Now China, by opening up of the ports across Indian Ocean. Now to counter this, India has launched a mission called as, it is necklace of diamond. Necklace of, we call it as the diamond. This you should be aware. And the second one we call it as, now initially India has launched an operation called as the Sagar Doctrine. What is the Sagar Doctrine? Now Sagar means security and growth across the region. Security and growth across the region. Now the security has been enhanced to which one? Mahasagar. Mahasagar. What does this Maha means? Maritime edge. Maritime edge of security and growth across the region. Now which region is that? Indian Ocean region. Second one. The third one we call it as, the third initiative which was taken up by, we call it as the India. We call it as IORA. What is this IORA? Indian Ocean Rim Association. Indian Ocean, the Rim Association was an initiative again taken up by India now to enhance the security in, we call it as Indian Ocean. We call it as Indian Ocean. This is majorly we call it as the three things. The fourth one we call it as, it is Rayasina Dialogue. Rayasina Dialogue is again to increase it is security in which ocean? The Indian Ocean region. Again there is Rayasina, it's a hill which is present in, we call it as New Delhi. And normally it has been hosted by, we call it as Observer Research Foundation. Hosted by Observer Research Foundation and supported by, we call it as MEA. What's MEA? Ministry of External Affairs. Ministry of External Affairs, and this we call it as Rayasina Dialogue also. Yes or no, boss? Now these four initiatives majorly to target the security in which ocean? Security in, we call it as Indian Ocean region. And India also has it has different types of ports in Indian Ocean region to enhance the security. That we'll discuss in a different topic. Yes, as of now, just remember this. Now one we got as necklace of diamond, Rayasina Dialogue, Indian Ocean Rim Association, Mahasagar Doctrine also. Yes, this is about the first one called as the security related aspects in the Indian Ocean region, majorly focusing upon Colombo Security, the conclave or Colombo Security Dialogue. Yes or no? Yes. The second one, it is even there is an ongoing, we call it as security dialogue between, we call it as India and we call it as India and Sri Lanka, and that we call it as Mitra Shakti. Hope you are aware. Mitra Shakti, that you should be aware. Done. The next topic we call it as the labor codes. Very, very important. Highly important. Yes, exactly, online. Sagar, Mahasagar Doctrine, we have discussed. Ambanto Tapot also. It's in the Sri Lanka. Yes. Okay. Now coming back to the second topic, we call it as labor codes. Why this labor codes was in use? Why, boss? Why this was in use? Online fast. Why this was the news? Now with respect to news part, now the major one we call it as, there were 4 important quotes. Now which was that quotes? Now we call it as the cordon, the wages in which year? 2019. Second one we call it as cordon social security. Now cordon we call it as social security. Third one, the code on occupational safety. Cordon we call it as occupational safety. And fourth one, now code on industrial relations. All these 3 which was brought in which year? 2020. Yes or no, boss? Now understand, now leave all those things, but first understand. But first one thing that it is, now you are clearing UPSC or some other exam and you are entering some employment. Now when you are going for employment, what are the different things you will expect from an employer? What will you expect from government, boss? First one, wages, not a security, wage. How much payment will you give me? Is it 1 lakh, 2 lakh or 1 crore? Wages. First I'll be expecting here is what? Wages. And after wages? After wages, now what type of social security I have after my retirement, after 60 years? Yes or no, boss? The third one, after the social security, what is the occupational safety I have? Now think that if I'm coming to it is teach, don't you think I expect some basic requirement? I expect some water, I expect some, we call it as the good, it is the climatic condition to work here, and a good, we call it as environment. That comes under where? Occupational safety. Now can I work it under? It is, we call it as the riskier environment, occupational safety. I require occupational safety. Think that if I'm a woman, I expect some security. It is some cab, some we call it as, it is we call it safety and security for women in a location. Yes or no? After this, I also expect some we call it as, it is we call it as the relations also. Code on we call it as which one? Now we call it as the industrial relations also. Yes or no, boss? Now under this industrial relations, how much or can I go for strike? Or do I need to give a notice? Second one, can I form trade unions? How can I form? How can I register? How can I get a license? Under where? Under we call it as the organizational relations, or we call it as industrial relations. Yes or no, boss? One of the best codes I can say. Now up till today or up till it is last week, we were following the, we call it as the codes which were being brought by, we call it as the colonial rulers. But now for the first time we are integrating all these colonial relations or the acts, and we are bringing in what? We are bringing in an act. That codes we call it as, codes means regulations. Codes means regulations. Regulation on wages, regulation on social security, regulation on occupational safety, security. Organizational with respect to, we call it as relations or industrial relations. Now this was brought in the year 2019, 2020. But unfortunately, after 5 to 6 years, this we are implementing on ground. Now this one will come into what? Effect. Or this came into effect. Now the government has made all the 4 labor codes. All the labor codes effective. What does effective means? What does effective means? It was implemented on ground or came into effect. Or we call it as what? Came into effect. Nothing but the government has implemented this week. Implemented in this week. Yes or no? Now shall we see one by one? Now first one, understand this picture. Now code on wages brought in the year 2019 related to wages. Second one we call it as industrial relations related to trade unions. Third one, the social security majorly related to pensions. Fourth one, occupational safety, health and we call it working conditions related to health of the workers. We will see all the things one by 1 year. Done? Now sir, now my simple question is, why government should bring in all these codes? Why? What is the reason for that? What was the reason for bringing all these 4 codes? Reason. The reason is simple. The constitution mandates the government to do that. The constitution mandates what? Mandates to do that. Now what is that mandate, sir? Now mandate was in the form of, we call it as what? Fundamental rights. And the mandate was in the form of, we call it as which one? DPSP. Yes or no, boss? If it is yes, can I get some articles which mandates under fundamental rights, which mandates under DPSP? Now majorly, now under fundamental rights, we have few articles focusing on, we call it as the focusing on labor codes. The first and foremost article we call it as Article 19 Clause 1 Clause B. Now what does this Article 19 talks about? It is freedom of speech and expression. What does Article 19 Clause 1 Clause B talks about? Right to form, we call it as what? The right to form, which one? Now association to C. Now majorly, the B1 talks about majorly. It is freedom to form, we call it as a group. Now that we call it as the majorly, right to assemble. Right to assemble. Now does it include right to strike? Does it include right to picketing? Yes, boss. Now we'll discuss one by one. Now Article 19 Clause 1 Clause B talks about, it is freedom to, the freedom to form a group or freedom to assemble. First one. Second one, 19 Clause 1 Clause C talks about what? Talks about, now we have a freedom to form which one? Association. Now in that, the trade unions, simplification of registration process, simplification of establishment, getting up of easy licenses. Yes or no? As a part of assembly, can I go for strike? Can I go for strike? No. You can go for a strike, but that strike is not constitutionally mandated. Be cautious. Right to strike, which has not been given under, we call it as the Constitution. Rather, it has been given under the Industrial Disputes Act of 1948. Be cautious. Now our assembly should only be peaceful, and that peaceful without arms, and that we call it as what? Picketing. That we call it as what? Picketing. Only picketing. I can go for peaceful assembly. Can I go for strike as a part of Article 19(1)(c) or 19(1)(b)? No. First one. Second one. Now Article 19(1)(c) talks about which one? Right to form associations. Now I can also form trade unions also. Trade unions. Cooperatives also. Yes or no? And the word cooperatives has been added via 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011. That you should be aware. And the third one you should also know about Article 23 and Article 24 also. What is Article 23 and what does Article 24 talks about? Right against exploitation. You cannot exploit the workers via forced labor or via involving the children in employment which are less than 14 years of age. Our constitution is mandating via which one? via fundamental rights. Via, we call it as fundamental rights. Via, we call it as fundamental rights. Perfect. Yes is only exactly yes. Now second one, even DPSP also mandates, saying that even DPSP also mandates. Now which all articles? Article 39. Article 39 talks about it is equal pay for equal, it is the wage or equal work. Now which talks about both male and female should be given the equal wages, equal pay for equal work. 39, Article 39 talks about this. And along with that, it is 43A also. What does 43A talks about? It is involvement of workers in decision making. Involvement of, we call it as workers in where? Decision making. And this talks about equal pay for equal the work. And this talks about it is right against, we call it as what? Exploitation. Right against, we call it as exploitation. All these are being mandated as a part of, we call it as Article 23-24, it is Article 39, Article 43A also. Yes. Now based on these guidelines, the government has brought in different codes. The code on wages, code on industrial relations, code on it is industrial safety, security. The code on we call it as industrial relations also. All this has been brought in to achieve the constitutional mandates. To achieve constitutional mandates. Yes or no, boss? Now shall we see one by one what has been added as a part of the codes? Okay. The first one we call it as the code on, we call it as what? The code on, we call it as wages. Now under this code on wages, which has been brought in which year? 2019. Now under this code on wages, the government has clarified clearly, saying that it is equal wage for equal work. First one, they are talking about which one? Equal wages for equal what? Work. Nothing but both male and female should be given. Now what wages? Equal wages. Is it good or bad, boss? Now it is very good. Nothing but we are, for the first time, we are replacing the colonial acts via the form of, we call it as equal wage for equal work. Nothing but male should be equally paid with what? The females. Second one. Now the third major important one, not only wages, the wages should be provided within a dedicated time. Nothing but within 7th of the, it is every month. Within 7th of every month, the wages should be provided. Within 7th of the new calendar, the wages should be paid. The wages should be paid. Now when you are paying the wages, the wages should always be higher than the national minimum wage. Which should always be what? Which should always be more than, we call it as, the national minimum wages. If not, it is considered as what? Forced labor. Under which article? Under Article 23. It amounts to, we call it as, forced labor under Article 23 of our fundamental rights of our Indian Constitution. This also being mandated as a part of what? The wages. Don't you think it is good or bad, boss? It is very good. And the third one, under this code of wages, they are also clarifying, saying that you should give, we call it as, it is appointment letter to all the workers who are working under an organization. We need to get what? Appointment letter. Appointment letter to all the workers who are working under an organization. Be it organized, be it unorganized, everyone should get a appointment letter also. Everyone should get, we call it as, appointment letter as a part of, we call it as, the wages. Equal remuneration, the timely payment of wages. The third one, which also talks about, we call it as, which also talks about appointment letter before 7th we need to, we need to pay wages. This has been clarified by Supreme Court also. Clarified by Supreme Court, 7th in the munche salary kodbeku anta. And that should be more than minimum wages, and that should be uniform wages also. Uniform wages also for both, we call it as what? For both we call it as male and females. And that code we call it as Code on Wages, which was brought by Ministry of Labor and Employment, which was brought in by a dedicated minister. And that we call it as Code on, we call it as the wages. Yes or no? Second one. Second wage or the second code we call it as which code? Now code on we call it as Social Security. Code on we call it as, which one? Code on Social Security. Yes, yes. Code on we call it as the National Social Security. Now the one is, what do you mean by the Social Security? Now safety, boss. Now what does safety means? Now providing pensions, providing PF, providing EPFO, all those things comes under Social Security. Now this code on Social Security was being brought in which year? 2020, which was implemented in which year? 2025, this year. Now this was brought in which year? 2020. 2020. Now in this 2020, they have clearly clarified saying that Social Security should be provided to all the workers. All the workers. Now what does all means? It is perfect. Both we call it as formal or organized, and which also includes what? Which also includes, we call it as unorganized workers also. Which includes organized and unorganized. Not only organized and unorganized, which also includes gig workers, which also includes platform workers, which also includes, we call it as daily wage workers. Everyone should be provided what? Social Security coverage, which includes pensions, which includes the majorly the PF, EPFO, all those things. Now don't you think it is good or it is bad? It is very good. Yes or no? It is very, very, very good with respect to, we call it as the Social Security also. Social Security coverage should be given to whom? It is the employees. Now we should also provide, we call it as maternity benefit also. For the women, we need to provide which one? The maternity benefit also. Maternity benefit also. Maternity benefit also has been provided as a part of, we call it as Code on Social Security Net. Second one. The third one, which is the third code? Which is the third code? The code on, we call it as, the code on, we call it as occupational safety. Now, when I am working in the company or when I am working under some industries, now what all occupational safety should be provided to male and to the female and to the employees? What all occupational safety should they need to provide? First and foremost one, the first and foremost one, they need to provide, it is good environment to work. Good environment to work. Now think that if I'm a female, what should the security should be provided to female workers? Now female workers should be provided with adequate safety and security also. And they should also be provided the creche facility. For a pregnant ladies, we need to provide with creche facilities to take care of the babies, to take care of the feeding practices. Good environment. Along with that, if they are a women, if the women employees are present in an organization, we need to provide, we call it as, it is which one? The creche facility should also be provided. Creche facility should be provided. Along with that, it is every year health checkup should be mandated. Health checkup should be provided for everyone per year. Once in a year, it is this organizational workers are being provided with what checkups? It is the health checkups has been mandated. Health checkups has been mandated and major focus is being given on the individuals who are 40 plus. The major focus is being given on the workers who are 40 plus because they are highly riskier with respect to it is different types of diseases. They are being provided, we call it as the 40 plus. And the fourth one, women are being allowed to work 24/7. They are being allowed to work 24/7 round the clock in 3 shifts. They can work even in the morning shift, afternoon shift as well as night shift also. But when you are going for a shift, you need to get the consent of whom? Consent of the women worker. Up till now, it is women who are not allowed to go for night shift except in few cities. But now, under the Code on Occupational Safety, we have allowed to take up the occupation across the 3 shifts. Morning, afternoon as well as the night also. But when there is a night shift, automatically there must be an escort. There must be an escort. There must be adequate transport facilities like cabs. Hope you're getting it. Sir, all these things are good. For whom? For the employee. Or for the employer or for the employee? Employee. But it is bad for whom? The employer owner. Now, if the owner is investing all his profits for providing of the safety and security, will he come to India and will he invest? No. Now, as soon as the Modi government said that we are implementing, it is the report says that there is a huge amount of risk to GDP and employment will also come down gradually. Because the private players might feel that India is not good for doing business. India is not good for reserve doing business. And automatically they will shift it to some other countries where the rules and regulations are feasible. Hope you are getting it. It is good for the workers, but bad for country. The good for human development, bad for economy. That's the challenge. And the last one we call it as Code on, we call it as industrial relations. Code on the industrial relations, the Code on industrial relations. Now the Code on industrial relations majorly talks about which all things? Majorly which talks about now establishment of trade unions. We can establish trade unions in a simple manner without any cost. It is now trade unions can be established in what manner? In easier manner. But they have clarified saying that if a particular industry, if it is essential and basic utilities. Now think that my industry is the food industry. Now that food industry, don't you think it's a basic industry? Now can the trade unions, can they go for strike? Can they go for strike? Yes, they can go for strike. But there is a condition. Minimum 60 days of notice should be given to the industrial owners and to the government. Minimum 2 months notice should be given. Why? Because if I go for suddenly a strike, automatically it will impact whom? Automatically it will impact the workers. Automatically it will impact the workers. Automatically it will impact the customers also. And it will impact the market also. For that, the government has clarified saying that if the basic or the essential utilities, basic or essential utilities companies, if they are going for a strike, minimum how many days of we call it as notice should be served. It is minimum 2 months of notice should be served to the government. Minimum the 60 days or 2 months notice should be given to whom? Given to, we call it as the government. Minimum 2 months is mandatory. Second, the third major important, the one here is, now this trade unions are being given it is higher rights under the codes also. Higher rights under it is code on, we call it as industrial relations. Nothing but when a company is going for a decision, they need to take the consent or the decision of the trade unions also. All this has been mandated, and they have also clarified saying that one license is more than sufficient to trade across India. Not across the state, it is across India. Take an example of, I want to trade the agriculture commodities. Now should I need to take the licenses in 28 states? Not required. One license from Government of India is more than sufficient to trade across 28 states. One license across India I can trade. Is it good or bad? It is very good. And all this has been clarified by our, we call it as the cabinet, the committee. The cabinet committee has clarified saying that we are going for implementation on ground, all these 4 codes. And that all these 4 codes we call it as Code on Wages 2019, Code on we call it as the Occupational Safety, Code on we call it as the major one. The Code on we call it as the Occupational Safety, Code on Social Security, Code on Industrial Relations. Done. All these 3 in the year 2020, Code on Wages in the year 2019. Yes or no? Now this at least you should be aware with respect to. First it was 6 weeks, now it is 60 days. Highly important, you should know about all this with respect to the codes. So all this. Done? Okay. What's the answer for this? A only, okay. Okay, A, okay. Or C? Okay. Okay, A is right. Okay, A is right and like a reason is wrong. R is wrong. Okay. Now assertion, post-labor reforms. Nothing but after 2025. Now reforms mandate employer to provide all workers with the free manual health checkup and ensures mandatory timely payment of wages. Yes. First one done. Second one, the reason is Code on Wages 2019 applies minimum wages only to scheduled industries. Scheduled means formal industries. While the occupational safety, health and working condition imposes significant obligations regarding the workers' welfare, including the health and we call it as safety measures. See, all these are correct, but it is not only for what? Scheduled industries, it is for all. It is a formal and informal one. They need to pay more than what? Minimum wages. If not, this amounts to what? This amounts to violation of, we call it as Article 23. Article 23 talks about majorly forced labor or begar. Forced labor or begar, Article 23. Now second one is incorrect. Second one is 101% incorrect. And first option is correct. And what's the answer for this? A is true and R is false. Answer is C. Done. Online, I hope it is clear. The next one, highly important one, we call it as the Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. The Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. Now understand why this solar observatory was in use suddenly. Why? Huh? Okay, 100 years has completed. Okay, we'll see. But not exactly that. Now, the first and foremost news here is recently, now, Aryabhatta Research Institute of Observational the Sciences, ARIES, Aryabhatta Research Institute of Observational Sciences, along with this Indian Institute of Astrophysics, it's in Bengaluru, Indian Institute of Astrophysics, along with that different international partners, they are reconstructing 100 years of solar observation. All these three, one we call it as Aryabhatta Research Institute, Indian Institute of Astrophysics, and an international organization, they are constructing a century old. They are constructing, we call it as 100 years old. The solar data they are reconstructing. 100 years, the solar data they are constructing related to magnetic field. Related to, we call it as solar magnetic field. Related to, we call it as what? Related to, we call it as the solar magnetic field. First, we will talk about Kodaikanal. Second one, we will talk about majorly about, we call it as the sun also we'll discuss, and the sun missions we'll talk about, Aditya 1, we'll talk about Soho mission, we'll talk about Parker solar probe, we'll see all those things one by one. Yes? Now is the first news part, is it clear? Now news here is recently all this organization, they are reconstructing it is 100 years of the solar data, they are reconstructing it with available data from, we call it as Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. From it is the Kodaikanal Solar Observatory, they are reconstructing it, all these organizations, yes or no boss? Now first one getting called as Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. First one we call it as the Kodaikanal Solar Observatory, KOSO. Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. Now first one, this Kodaikanal Solar Observatory, where is the location, when it has been established, and which ministry? And what's the objective of this Kodaikanal Solar Observatory? The first one about this Kodaikanal Solar Observatory, which has been established under which ministry? Ministry of Science and Technology. Perfect. It was established as a autonomous organization under, we call it as Ministry of Science and Technology. First. Second one, what is the location of this Kosovo? What is the location? Perfect. Now the location of this Kosovo here is, it is present in, we call it as Palani Hills of which state? Now Palani Hills of, we call it as which state? Now Palani Hills of, we call it as Tamil Nadu. Palani Hills, which is present in, we call it as which state? Tamil Nadu. Second. And the third one, when was this Kosovo established? This Kosovo has been established in the year 1899. But this started operational after 1904 and 5. This started operation after, we call it as 1904, after 5 years. Now sir, all these things are fine sir. Now what's the objective of this Kosovo? What's the objective? Fast boss. What's the objective of this? Now the objective of this COSO year is now studying about the solar observation. Now studying about the sun, the complete aspect of sun. Now studying about the complete aspect of sun, about layers of sun, about the atmosphere of sun. Which is the atmosphere of sun? Corona. Studying about corona, studying about sunspots, studying about the changes of the sun, studying about the solar cycle. Now the sun changes once in how many years? Sun cycle changes once in how many years? 11 years. All these things are being studied by which organization? Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. Now by using multi-wavelength observation, it's not only using the visible light, they use the different multi-wavelength, infrared radiation, ultraviolet, the gamma, visible, all those things. By using which wavelength? By using multi-wavelength or multiple wavelength. Multiple wavelength. Now they started in 1904, and now if I compare it with 2025, how many years data is present with respect to COSO? Now more than, we call it as 120 plus years data related to sun is available. Hope you are getting it. Now if it is 120 varsha aur hatra data idre, now this organization, it is considered to be the longest data available on the earth. One of the largest data and one of the longest data related to sun available in where? It is Kodaikanal, it is Solar Observatory. Now we have data for more than 120 years. But all this data which has been collected by whom? Collected by the IRIS, collected by Indian Institute of Astrophysics, collected by international partners. They are reconstructing it is sun at the 100 years. Now they are reconstructing what? The sun of the last 100 years. Hope you're getting it. They are reconstructing the sun in the last. Sun in the last, we call it as 100 years. And for that, this topic was in use. And for that reason, this was in news from our current affairs topic point of view. Done, boss? Okay. Now if it is clear, the second one related to, we call it as the sun. Second one related to sun. Now what is sun? Sun is a star. Sun is a star, and it is the only star which is present in our where? Solar system. It is sun is a star, and it is the only star which is present in our where? Solar system. Be cautious. First one. Second one related to, we call it as the solar system. Related to, we call it as the system, or we call it related to the sun. Now, what are the different layers we have with respect to sun? Now we have the three layers. One we call it as the core. We call it as the photosphere. And the surrounding one we call it what? The chromosphere. And the atmosphere, it is made up of what? Atmosphere we call it as corona. Atmosphere we call it as corona. And the second one, core region, we call it as photo. Why it is called as photosphere? Because the nuclear fusion reaction will release the energies. The nuclear fusion reaction will release energy, and that we call it as photo. Photo means light. And the outer one we call it as the chromosphere. Now on this chromosphere we can observe the sunspots. We can observe sunspots. What do you mean by sunspots? The coolest spot on the sun. The coolest spot on the sun, we call it as sunspots, which is black in color. It's also called as black spots. Hope you're getting it. It is majorly, we call it as the sunspots, or it's also called as black spots. Yes. Highly important one. highly important one, sunspots. Now India has launched a mission to study about the sun, which was considered to be the first solar mission, and that first solar mission we call it as Aditya L1. L1 means Lagrange point 1, which was named after a scientist called as Joseph Lagrange. Joseph Lagrange. Lagrange point 1, which was launched in which year? In the year 2023. 2023. And USA has also launched a mission called as, now USA has launched a mission called as, the recently we call it as Parker Solar Probe. Hope it is clear, boss. Now all this are related to the sun also. All this are related to, we call it as sun also. Yes, yes. All these are related to Aditya means sun. L1 means Lagrange point 1. How many Lagrange points do we have with respect to, we call it as around Earth? 5. That we call it L1, L2, L3, L4 and L5. Yes, that you should be aware. We have 5 points and we have launched it to which one? L1. Yes, this is about, we call it as the complete aspect related to, we call it as the sun and a Kodaikanal, the solar observatory also. Done? Done? Okay. What's on this? D. Okay. Now consider the following statement regarding the Kodaikanal Solar Observatory. Now, Solar Observatory, the COSO, Kodaikanal Solar Observatory, operated by Indian Institute of Astrophysics. Operated by Indian Institute of Astrophysics, that is present in Bengaluru. It is present in Bengaluru. Be cautious. Functioning under which ministry? Science and Technology. Be cautious. Done. Now, which is the major prestigious mission which has been launched by Indian Institute of Astrophysics? Which is the prestigious mission? All these are, it is the 100 years back. Now, which is the prestigious mission which has been launched by, we call it as the Indian Institute of Astrophysics? Try at least. Indian Astronomical Observatory. Now, which is present in where? Hanle, Ladakh. The prestigious mission which has been launched by astrophysics, we call it as, the majorly we call it as, it is present in, we call it as Hanle. Where is Hanle? Ladakh. Yes or no? That you should be aware. Was established in, we call it as, not in 1909, in the year 1899. In the year 1899, the same year, the Evershed effect has also been discovered. Now again, all these are completely, it is wrong. The second one, Kosovo, is located in Palani Hills. Now Palani Hills is correct. It is not in Kerala, it's in Tamil Nadu. Again, geography question. And maintains one of the world's longest solar observation archives. Yes, perfect. Yes or no? This is perfect. Half is correct, half is wrong. If that's the case, completely wrong. Now which is correct? Now both are not correct. Answer is D. That you should be aware. With respect to, we call it as the COSO, or we call it as the Kodaikanal, the solar observatory. Yes or no, boss? Now in Tamil Nadu, on the border between Tamil Nadu and Kerala, we also have one of the most important prestigious observatory other than COSO. Which is that? It is not the Vikram Sarabhai one. Vikram Sarabhai, it's in Kerala. Online fast, try at least. Now, shall I give some hint? Now, related to, we call it as, related to hadron. Okay. It's fine. But now, coming to Tamil Nadu. Coming to, it is majorly we call it as the Tamil Nadu. The first one, the Tamil Nadu is present in where? South India. South India. Now with respect to Tamil Nadu, capital of Tamil Nadu? At Chennai, initially it was called as the Madras. Madras was being renamed as, we call it as the Chennai. The Chennai, second one. The third one, we call it as, the third one, now recently, now Tamil Nadu has established, we call it as Dugong Sanctuary. Now, Dugong. Now this Dugong is also called as what? It is majorly Dugong is called as the sea cow. Dugong, it is also called as the sea cow. It is present in, or it was present in, Dugong Sanctuary has been present in where? It is when we call it as Gulf of, we call it as, it is Gulf of Mannar. Munnar Allah. Gulf of Mannar. Munnar Ricin, which has become the first Dugong Sanctuary, which has been established at where? Which was established at, we call it as Gulf of, we call it as the Mannar. And recently, now Tamil Nadu has become the first state in India to go for which farming? Now contract farming. It is, Tamil Nadu has become the first one to go for the contract, the farming. Now contract farming, exactly, yes. The Dugong Marine Sanctuary also. And Tamil Nadu has become the first one to launch, we call it as, the first one to launch, the majorly we call it as the seagrass. Seagrass Sanctuary, again in Tamil Nadu, Seagrass Sanctuary also. Seagrass. And other than that, it is, which you also know about, now recently Tamil Nadu has launched one who donates the organs. They will be provided with a state honor. Now which country has become the first country, or which state has become the first state in the country to announce state honor for the organ donors? Tamil Nadu. Yes or no? Along with that, Tamil Nadu has also launched the Flamingo Sanctuary also in Rameshwaram. It is majorly Flamingo Sanctuary. The Flamingo, the sanctuary at where? Flamingo, the sanctuary at, we call it as the Tamil Nadu. Flamingo Sanctuary at, we call it as the Tamil Nadu. Exactly, the Munnar, the Dugong, and which you also know about, it is recently, or I can say, then the news we call it as, now recently we have established one of the largest, we call it as the nuclear fusion reactor. Now nuclear fusion reactor is also present in where? Tamil Nadu. Again Tamil Nadu, it is near to, we call it as which nuclear reactor? It is which nuclear reactor? Kudankulam. Kudankulam nuclear reactor. That also you should be aware as a part of, we call it as, it is Kudankulam. Now which port is called as Green Port of India? It is, which port is called as the Green Port? Now that Green Port, now this Green Port we got a what? Now how many ports do we have in Tamil Nadu? Which is that? Tuticorin, Ennore Port and Chennai Port. Now which port has been renamed as, or which port has been called as Green Port? It is the Ennore Port. The Ennore Port is called as, we call it as the Tamil Nadu. Now recently we have launched the third ISRO launching center also. It is Kalachakra. Again that's also present in where? It is Tamil Nadu. Kalachakra. First one it's in, we call it as the major one, it's in Kerala. Now which is that? It is Tumba Equatorial, the launch center. Second one we call it as Sriharikota, and the third one we have launched it at, we call it as Kalachakra. It's in Tamil Nadu. Kalachakra, exactly, yes. Kudankulam, yes, you should also know. Now the fourth one we call it as INO. Now what is INO? The Indian Neutrino Observatory. Indian Neutrino Observatory, it's in Theni district. It's in Theni district of, or the border between, we call it as Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Kerala and Tamil Nadu. INO. Indian Neutrino Observatory is also present in, we call it as Tamil Nadu. Yes, yes. Ennore Port, Kulashekharapatnam, yes, we have discussed. Third one. Yes or no, boss? Done. Now this is about our, we call it as the Tamil Nadu part. Clear? I hope there is no doubts. Now, no doubts? Okay. The next one we call it as Matsya 6000. Today there is also news. Today also there is a news. Nothing but Matsya 6000 will be delayed. Will be delayed because of, we call it as cyclone in the Bay of Bengal. Cyclone in the Bay of Bengal, it might delay. But coming back to, we call it as Matsya 6000. What is Matsya? It is, Matsya means ocean or sea. 6000 means, now 6000 means it is the 6000 meter depth. Yes or no? Now my first question is, why this was in news? Why this was in news? Why? Now recently, it is the government has clarified saying that it is government called as the Jitendra Singh. Now Jitendra Singh has clarified saying that it is, we will be launching the Matsya 6000. In which year? Matsya 6000 in the year 2026, that is next year. Now to launch a full-fledged Matsya 6000 to a depth of 6000 meters, don't you think we need to go for a pilot? Pilot means what? Trial. Now to go for a trial run, we have selected two important personalities. One we call it as Jatendra Pal Singh and we call it as Raju Ramesh. Now we will be going for a trial run this week. Not to a depth of 6000 meters, to a depth of how many meters? 500 meters. But in 2026, we will be launching it to a depth of how many? 6000 meters. Yes or no? Now shall we see one by one now? No. Now first one getting called as Deep Ocean Mission. Or it is also called as what? Samudrayana Mission. Deep Ocean Mission. It is also called as Samudrayana Mission. Now my question is, after the success of Chandrayana 3, the government tilted the idea towards which one? After we call it as the success of Chandrayana 3. After the success of Chandrayana 3, the government focusing on, we call it as sea. Now majorly for extraction of, we call it as polymetallic nodules. Now little bit information about Chandrayana 3. Now with respect to Chandrayana 3, now when was the Chandrayana 3 launched? It was launched on, we call it as July 14th, 2023. It was launched on, we call it as July 14th, 2023. And it reached the moon. Which part of the moon? South pole of the moon. And that south pole of the moon, it was launched on, I can say it was landed on August 23rd, that 2023. Yes or no? Now after the success of this Chandrayana, the 3 to the south pole of the moon, this August 23rd, it is since 2023, we are celebrating it as what? National Space Day. National Space Day. First one you should know. And second one, the landing site we call it as what? Landing point we call it as Shiv Shakti Point. Shiv Shakti Point. The landing point we call it as the Shiv Shakti Point. Now in the Chandrayana 3, we have used majorly two important devices. One we call it as a lander and the second one we call it as a rover. The lander we call it as what? Lander we call it as Vikram lander. Now based on Vikram Sarabhai. Vikram Sarabhai, the father of the space. And the rover, nothing but it will move. The rover we call it as Pragyan. The rover we call it as pragyan. Yes. Now after the success, now we are moving towards, we call it what? The deep ocean mission, or it is also called as, we call it as what? Or it is also called as Samudrayana mission. It was also called as the Samudrayana mission. It is also called as Samudrayana mission. Now with respect to Samudrayana mission, now the Samudrayana mission has been launched by which ministry? Now majorly we call it as the Ministry of, we call it as Earth Sciences. Ministry of Earth Sciences. Now under this Ministry of Earth Sciences, if I want to reach the deep oceans, don't you think I want a mission, I want a device, or I want equipment? Now that equipment we call it as what? That equipment we call it as which one? The Matsya 6000. Now my question is, now I want to reach it to it is deep oceans, but can I go via swimming? Now if I go via swimming, what will be my body? Nothing but because of huge amount of pressure, huge amount of density, my body gets broken down into different pieces. Because of intense pressure was. Now to reduce that, what can I do? I need to go to the oceans. I should also be safe. But for that, it is deviser or developer, we call it as a vehicle. And that vehicle we call it as what? Matsya 6000. Hope it is clear. Now this Matsya 6000 has been developed by which organization? It is that vehicle we call it as what? Matsya 6000. That vehicle we call it as Matsya 6000. Now what does the 6000 means? 6000 meters depth. It's not 6000 kilometers. 6000 meters, nothing but 6 kilometers. Done. Now this Matsya 6000 has been developed under which ministry? Ministry of Science, no doubt. But developed by which institute? Developed by NIOT. National Institute of Ocean Technology, which is present in where? Chennai. National Institute of Ocean Technology, which was present in, we call it what? Chennai. First one. Second one. Now sir, now in this Matsya 6000, how many hours can I stay in water? In normal times, how many hours can I stay in emergency times in water? Now in normal times, I can stay for 12 to 16 hours. But during emergency, I can stay in water for in and around 100 hours. Maximum 100. After 100? Yes or no? Maximum 96 hours. And after that, chatta. Yes or no? It is maximum I can stay as 96 hours during emergency. At the max. But after that, possibility of life is not possible in this even Matsya 6000 also. We need to evacuate them. Like Sunita Williams. We need to evacuate them. It is or else, it is not even a single piece you will get from this Matsya 6000 also. Now sir, all these things are fine, but my major one is, sir, why are we launching this Samudrayan, or why are we launched this, we call it as Matsya 6000 also? Why are we investing huge amount of resources? Now majorly for two purposes. One is for environmental and second one is for what? Economic purpose. Now if it is environment, how it is beneficial for environment? Now this environment, we can do a biodiversity research. Without harming the biodiversity of the deep oceans. Now the organisms which are present in deep oceans, they are called as what? It is benthic organisms. They are called as benthic organisms, and a layer we call it as benthos. Now without harming them, we will be studying the organisms at a benthic region, about the benthos, and that we call it as the benthic. Now recently we have identified a dark oxygen in those deep oceans. Dark oxygen. It is dark oxygen means the oxygen which has been generated from the deep oceans via an organism called as chemotrophs. By an organism we call it as chemotrophs. Now what does chemotrophs means? It is the chemical reaction. Why the chemical reaction? The oxygen is being generated, and that oxygen we call it as the dark oxygen. First one. It is beneficial for economy also. How it is beneficial for economy? It is majorly via the extraction of, we call it as polymetallic nodules. Polymetallic nodules. Yes, polymetallic nodules. Next week we'll discuss about rare earth minerals. Why? Because on Friday it is cabinet has announced it is rare earth mineral mission also. Majorly for what purpose? Majorly for, it is for generation of, we call it as electronics, space equipments, batteries. Now the main agenda of this, the Samudriyan, is also for extraction of, we call it as the polymetallic nodules or rare earth minerals from the deep oceans. Because India does not have majority of the rare earth minerals, and we want it for electronics. We are importing it majorly from China, Taiwan, all those countries. Now that we will discuss in our next week about the rare earth minerals topic. Done? This is about, we call it as Samudriyan, the topic. Done? Is this clear? Now about Samudriyan, we have talked about majorly, we call it as the 6,000 meters, and it is considered to be India's first manned mission to the deep oceans. It is considered to be the first manned mission to deep oceans at 6,000 meters by using a vehicle called as which vehicle? The Matsya 6000, developed by NIOT Chennai. Under we call it as Ministry of the Earth Sciences. That we have discussed, and majorly we call it as the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Third one, how many human beings can we send it to the mission? It is deep oceans, it is 3 members at max. 3 we are planning, but as of now for a trial run we are planning for 2 at a depth of 500 meters. At depth of 500 meters, majorly for what purpose? Economic as well as for environmental development of, we call it as, it is the deep oceans. Hope it is clear. Done? This is about, we call it as the Matsya, the 6,000. Clear? Now solve this. Yes. China accounts for 70% of rare earth minerals, not 90%. Okay, Sama saying 3 both. Okay, online, perfect, yes. What's answer this? Okay. Now, the Matsya 6000 is a manned submersible by NIOT and Samudriyan, the project designed to dive up to 6,000 meters for deep sea exploration. Correct or wrong? Yes. Now second one, the submersible uses aluminium. Now can I use aluminium for the deep missions? No. Now aluminium is used normally in where? Normally when the density and when the pressure is normal, moderate. But when the density and it is temperature, if it is more, I cannot use aluminium. I need to use rare earth minerals. And that rare earth minerals we call it as titanium. It's not aluminium. That's the reason I did not discuss. Again, it's a common sense, boss. We need to use rare earth minerals. And that rare earth minerals we call it as the titanium. It's not titanium. It is titanium. It's a rare earth mineral that's been used to construct the Matsya 6000. If that's the case, second option is wrong. Now, which of the following is correct? It is A only is correct. Now, be cautious. In your UPS examinations, majority of the times, it won't be option C. Both the correct won't be there. Either it will be A only or it will be B only. Majority of the times. If not, it is neither. And later on, the minimum 10% options comes under, it is both 1 and 2. Some or the other way, there will be some traps. You should identify the traps. Yes or no? Yes. That is majorly we call it as Matsya 6000. Done? I hope it is clear. Now, with respect to we call it as, now while talking about we call it as the Matsya, the 6000, Matsya 6000. Now, you should know about the first and foremost one here is the first and foremost one. Now, sir, about the rare earth, the minerals. Now, why rare earth minerals is required for India? Now, which was the recent or which country is the largest, we call it as, the reserve holder of rare earth minerals? Now, which country is the largest producer of, we call it as, the rare earth minerals? And which country is the largest producer of, we call it as, the chips? Which country is the largest producer of semiconductors? Yes or no? Yes. Now all these things, now we will study with respect to our, in the next week, with the policy, along with policy. But if you want, I can just brief. Now majority of the reserves of the rare earth minerals are present in China. Now with respect to chip making, 90% of chip making is being done by Taiwan. Yes or no? Be cautious. And in the next week we'll talk about it is chip for India, and it's also called as Fab for India. Fab for India, majorly with respect to chip making. All that we'll discuss in the next class. Majorly China holds 70% of rare earth minerals. And India, in and around, we call it as 2%. But there is huge demand. For, we call it as rare earth minerals. Because for solar panels, semiconductors, medicines, followed by we call it as the different space equipments, jackets, bulletproof jacket, all those things. Demand is more, but supply is less. And that's the reason we are focusing intensively on rare earth minerals. But let's see, we will be successful or not. Yes or no? Next one. Highly important one, expect a question on this. Kalachakra festival. Yes. Fab for India. Yes. That we'll see as a part of policy also. Let it evolve. And that's the reason I did not discuss today. Let it evolve. It is at least by Monday or Tuesday. And the government will clearly clarify about the policy also. At least it will take it is 2 or 4 days. Now it is cabinet has approved. Now after cabinet approves, automatically it should give some guidelines. Now along with that also I can discuss the policy. That's the reason. Now coming to we call it as Kalachakra. Now why it was in use? Now recently Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister of India, the Shri Narendra Modi, has attended the biggest festival of Bhutan and the most important festival of Bhutan. And that we call it as what? Now recently in Manipur, the biggest festival of tribal groups has started, and that festival we call as what? Sangai Festival. The largest festival of Manipur, Sangai Festival. Yes, again it will take 1 week. Let it complete, let them enjoy, and we'll also be getting some outcomes, and along with that outcomes I can discuss, rather than only discussing about Sangai Festival. Yes or no? I can discuss about outcomes also, and that's the reason, it is, The first one, it is news. Why it was news? Now Prime Minister Modi attended the biggest and one of the most important festival of, we call it as the Bhutan, and that we call it as Kalachakra Festival. Done? Okay. Sir, my simple question is, now what is this Kalachakra, and it is famous for which religion? It is famous for Buddhism. Which Buddhism? Which Buddhism of it is the, or which is subsect of Buddhism? Is it Hinayana, Mahayana or Vajrayana? Yes or no, boss? That you should know. Now we'll see that one by one. We'll talk about Buddhism, we'll talk about sects of Buddhism also. Now sir, now what is this about? About means, it's a Sanskrit word. Kalachakra means, it's a Sanskrit word. It is, the Kala means time. Chakra means the wheel. Kala means time. It is Kala means we call it as the time. The chakra means the wheel. Kala means, it is majorly, it's a Sanskrit word. Kala means time, chakra means a wheel. It's a wheel. Now this Kalachakra, it is famous for a Buddhism called as Vajrayana Buddhism. Vajrayana Buddhism, or it is also called as Tantric Buddhism, magical Buddhism, Tantric Buddhism. Tantric Buddhism, or we call it as Vajrayana Buddhism. In Vajrayana, who is the head of Vajrayana? Lamas. Now normally who is the highest Lama, or as of now, Dalai Lama. Now this Tantric Kalachakra, it will be headed by whom? It will be headed by one of the Lamas, highest Lamas. Now it is normally headed by we call it as Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama. Yes or no, boss? Dalai Lama. Now normally this is Dalai Lama. It was majorly celebrated in which country? Bhutan. Celebrated in, we call it as the Bhutan. Hope it is clear. Now this is about our first one. Now second one, note the other end. Now this Kalachakra Tantra, or this Kalachakra consists of 3 wheels. Now which is the 3 wheel? One is inner wheel and outer wheel. Inner wheel and outer wheel. And second one we call it as alternative wheel. Second one we call it as the alternative wheel. First one we call it as inner wheel. It is inner wheel. Now which is the inner wheel of, it is any religion. Inner wheel means the human body and human mind. Hope it is clear. Now inner wheel of any religion, we call it as what? We call it as the core part. That core part we call it as human body, and we call it as what? Human body, and we call it as human mind. Human body and human mind, it is considered to be the inner wheel. Considered to be, we call it as inner wheel. Yes or no? First. Second one, outer wheel of the Kalachakra consists of, we call it as the material aspect of the world. Now which is the material aspect of the world? Which includes the planets, which includes the universe, solar system, which includes the sun. All this comes under where? Outer wheel. Outer, the wheel we call it as outer wheel, which includes universe, the planets, the stars, the solar systems. All this comes under where? Outer planets. Now sir, now without all those things, can I achieve, we call it as nirvana in Buddhism? Now Vajrayana focuses on alternative wheel via magical, that is called as Vajra or Tantric Buddhism. What do you mean by Tantric Buddhism? Via rituals, via magical practices, we can achieve what? Via magical practices we can achieve, we call it as, we can achieve nirvana. And this wheel we call it as what? Alternative wheel. What is alternative wheel? Via magic. Via magic, and that Buddhism we call it as Vajrayana Buddhism. It is also called as Tibetan Buddhism. It is also called as Tantric Buddhism. Tantric Buddhism. Now this Tantric Buddhism has normally influenced from Bengal. This Tantric Buddhism has been influenced from Bengal to Tibet. Bengal to Tibet, and that type of Buddhism we call it as, that type of Buddhism we call it as what? Yes. Exactly online, exactly yes. Online, I hope you guys are enjoying the class. Now this part is clear. Now what is subsects of Buddhism? Now what is Buddhism? Who is the founder of Buddhism? When was Buddhism originated? From where? Now, regarding Buddhism, we call it as what is Buddhism? Buddhism is a religion. It's a religion. Now it was being started by we call it as, it is the majorly we call it as Mahavir or Buddha. It is by Gautama Buddha. It was proposed by we call it as Gautama Buddha. This Gautama Buddha attained we call it as Nirvana. Attained Nirvana in a present day. In a present day we call it as Bodh Gaya. Below People Tree we call it as Bodh Gaya. Where is this Bodh Gaya? It's in Bihar. It's in we call it as present day Bihar. Near to we call it as Patna. Present day we call it as the Bodh Gaya. And it's also UNESCO World Heritage Site also now. It is majorly. It is Nalanda also. At the same time, it is developed as we call it what? Developed as we call it as the tourist spot under the Buddhism also, Buddhist circuit also. Be cautious again. The third major important one, now in Buddhism, 4 symbols are most prominent. Which is that symbols which are being worshipped in Buddhism? Which is that the symbols? The first and foremost symbol we call it as the horse, white horse. That white horse we call it as what? It is majorly this white horse we call it as, it is Gautama Buddha living the we call it as, it is the palace. Living the palace, it is we call it as the horse. Horse symbolizes Buddha living the we call it as the palace. First one. Second one we call it as, now in Bodh Gaya, I said in Bodh Gaya, he attained Nirvana. It is symbolized as we call it as the people leaf. The people leaf, Nirvana. The third one we call it as, now he gave a first sermon. First sermon at where? Sarnath. And that has been symbolized with what? Deer, or we call it as wheel. Deer or the wheel. And what is the fourth one? It is death of Buddha. Death of Buddha. And that death of Buddha, it has been symbolized as we call it as stupas. That it is symbolized as we call it as stupas. Yes or no? First one we call it as Mahabhi Nishkramana. Living above the palace, we call it as Mahabhi Nishkramana. Living above all the, it is palacely wellness. And that we call it as Mahabhi Nishkramana. Second one, it is the Nirvana. The people tree we call it as the people leaf, we call it as Nirvana. And the third one in Sarnath, we call it as the major in Sarnath. He gave a first sermon. And that first sermon we call it what? It is Mahachakran Parinirvana, or we call it as, it is majorly we call it as, the symbolized as what? It is wheel. Symbolized as wheel, that is the first sermon has been provided, and the first disciple we call it as Ananda. First disciple we call it as Ananda. And the last one we call it as death, Mahaparinirvana. Mahaparinirvana, nothing but death of, we call it as death of, we call it as what? It is Buddha. And this is about our majorly, the four things. Exactly, yes. And major one we call it as, the wheel one, it's also called as Dharma Chakra Pravartana. It's also been symbolized as Dharma Chakra Pravartana. It is majorly, he gave a first sermon, and the first disciple we call it as Ananda. Now after the death of Buddha, now this Buddhism has been, it is divided into different subsects. And out of that different subsects, the major one we call it as Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. The majorly three subsects of Buddhism. Majorly we call it as three subsects of Buddhism. One we call it as, second one we call it as Mahayana. Third one we call it as Vajrayana. Understand? Now Hinayana means lesser vehicle. Now Buddha is not being considered as God. Rather Buddha is being considered as what? It is a human. It is, be cautious. Now in Hinayana, Buddha is not being worshipped as a God. Buddha is worshipped as a teacher. Buddha is being worshipped as a, it is Guru. Buddha is being worshipped as a human. Yes or no? This is a traditional sect which has been developed. Now against this, now modified form of, we call it as modified form of Buddhism has been originated, and that we call it as Mahayana. Maha means what? It is greater vehicle. Greater vehicle means greater supporters of Buddhism. Now in this Buddhism, it is Mahayana Buddhism, Buddha is not being, it is the worshipped as a guru or a teacher. Rather Buddha has been worshipped as what? God. Hope it is clear. Now sir, now in our first one Hinayana, in Hinayana, it is, we exactly follow the preaching which has been done by Buddha. But here, it has been modified form of Buddhism. Now here the preaching was in form of Pali. Here the preaching was in form of what? It is Sanskrit. And here it is in Vajrayana. In Vajrayana, it's a mix of both. Now whatever the Buddha, the preachings has been followed, along with that they have added a Tantric Buddhism, Tantric part. Tantric means we call it as magical form of Buddhism has been added here. And that Vajrayana is also called as Tibetan Buddhism, the recent origination during 11th century AD. But Buddha originated during, or Buddhism originated during 6th century BC. Hope it is clear. Now first one, it is Hinayana means lesser vehicle. Mahayana means greater vehicle. Now Vajrayana means it is Tantric. Tantric Buddhism. Yes or no? Now here Buddhism is being considered as what? The teacher. Now here only symbols are worshipped. Symbols, which includes horse, which is majorly the people leaf, which includes stupas, all those things. But here it is majorly we call it as idol worship. Now here the Buddha is being worshipped as what? God. Here it is in Tantric. Now in Tantric Buddhism, now Nirvana can be achieved via magic. Hope it is clear. Hope you guys are getting it. Now in which religion it is being preached? The original religion of Buddha, Pali. And what is the religion which is preached here? Sanskrit. What is the language which is preached here? Tibet. Yes or no? Now, the fourth one. Now fourth major important one. Now this Hinayana, it is called as traditional Buddhism. Traditional Buddhism, it is also called as the Theravada. This Hinayana Buddhism is also called as Theravada. What is Theravada? Highly rigid. But who is flexible? Mahayana. Now this has been originated during 11th century AD. Famous in Tibet. Famous in Tibet, and another reason it is called as the Theravada, or the famous we call it as. Yes. Done? I hope it is clear. Now this is about, we call it Kalachakra, and about Buddhism, and about the different sects of Buddhism also. Solve. What is this? Can I answer? What is this? Now with reference to Kalachakra ceremony, consider the following statements. Now Kalachakra ceremony is rooted in where? Kalachakra Tantra, nothing but magical religion of, we call it what? Buddhism, and includes the creation of the sand mandala representing the Kalachakra mandala, the palace. Now majorly it is rooted in, we call it as Kalachakra. The first option is correct. The teachings of Kalachakra are divided into 3 wheels of time, with the outer wheel the guiding practitioners through path of tantric. Is it right or wrong? Now wrong, boss. Now I already said that it is outer wheel depicts what? It is material objects. The inner wheel talks about our body, and this represents what? Alternative. Which one of the following are incorrect? Now which of the following is incorrect? It is second one is incorrect. 2 only is incorrect. Yes or no? Done? Okay. Next one we call it as the ricin was in use. Now why this ricin was in use? Now recently the ricin poison, the terror plot. Now Gujarat has arrested, Gujarat police has arrested the news. The news here is, now after the Red Fort attack, after the Red Fort, we call it as bomb blast case, the Red Fort bomb blast a case. The second one, the different doctors, the doctors were conspiring to mix which one? Ricin in the food items across India. They were planning Majorly we call it as the ricin. Majorly we call it as the food items across the different temples, across the different we call it as the major densely populated areas. Now sir, my simple question is, what is this ricin? Is this ricin dangerous? How to extract that? How to extract that? Now what are the harmful aspect of ricin? Now we'll see all those things one by one related to this case. First and foremost one here is, what is ricin? Now ricin, it's a poison. It's the poison, and it has been declared as a chemical weapon under, we call it as Chemical Weapons Convention. It is a poison, not only a poison, it was considered as, or it is considered as what? It is considered as chemical weapon. Chemical weapon under which convention? Chemical Weapon Convention. We should not use ricin, and that's the reason it has been declared as Schedule 1 poison under the Chemical Weapons Convention. Schedule 1, it is very dangerous. Even consuming even 1 mg or half a mg, it is highly dangerous. A single drop mixed with ricin, it is end of the game. It is very much dangerous. It is considered as what? It is considered as chemical weapons, and the Chemical Weapons Convention, it was declared as, we call it as Schedule 1 chemical weapon under the Chemical Weapons Convention also. It was used a number of times. It was used a number of times during World War II. During, we call assassination of different, we call it as the top officials. It has been used. And after that, Chemical Weapons Convention has declared this drug as what? Or I can say this, the ricin as we call it as the poison, which is highly dangerous. Which is highly dangerous. But now, we have identified that in India, across different locations. From Srinagar, from Mumbai, from Gujarat, from Delhi, all those localities. Majorly, it is the professionals who were involved in, we call it, manufacturing of the ricin. Because now ricin requires the extraction of, we call it as a protein from a castor seed. It requires some chemical engineering also, some expertise also. Now sir, now how this ricin is being developed? How this ricin is being developed? Now ricin is being developed via we call it as castor seed. I hope you are aware about a castor oil. Now from this castor seed, we will extract what? We will extract 30 to 60% of the castor seed will be having what? Oil. Now this oil we will be using it for what? This oil we will be using it for, it is here. This oil can be used for, it is a number of various purposes. It can be used in industries, for soap manufacturing, for with respect to, we call it as the perfumes, with respect to, we call it as the majorly, it is the drugs, all those things. But after extraction of this oil, the left out part we call it as the waste. Hope it is clear. The left out 40% is waste. Now from this waste, the chemical engineers and the chemical doctors, they will be extracting a protein, and that protein we call it as what? Ricin. Now in a particular seed, hardly 1 to 5% will be only ricin. From this, 1 to 5% of the seed or the waste will only be what? Ricin. If I want to manufacture huge amount of ricin, it is the difficulty. But this 5% is more than sufficient to kill at least 1 lakh people. That is the game here. This is about castor seed. After extraction, the left out waste, we are extracting, we call it as, it is ricin. Sir, what is this ricin is fine now. But how this ricin is dangerous for a human body? How it is dangerous? How it is dangerous? How it is dangerous? Now this protein attaches to the ribosomes and blocks the protein synthesis. Highly dangerous. Now think that I am consuming ricin, directly or indirectly. It is either to die, or I can say it is the self drugs. Now if I take that, automatically this protein will attaches to which organs? They attach to the ribosomes. They attaches to the ribosomes. Now if they attach to the ribosomes, think that this is ricin. Now what's the function of the ribosome? Protein synthesis, protein factories. But now when this ricin attaches, it blocks the synthesis of protein itself. When it blocks the synthesis of protein, now think that I am walking from here to there and there to here. But if I want to do that, don't you think the ribosomes are synthesizing me proteins, and from that protein it is giving me energy. Hope you're getting it. Now without energy, can I take a class? No, boss. But now when it blocks the ribosome protein synthesis, can our organs function in a normal manner? No, boss. Now when this blocks the protein synthesis, automatically the energy to the different organs will start to stop. The energy carrying to the different organs will stop. When it stops, automatically, what are the different symptoms we can experience? Symptoms includes vomiting. Symptoms includes diarrhea. The symptoms includes, it is illness, nausea. It is the majorly, along with that, multi-organ failure will take place within 10 to 15 minutes. Not in 15 minutes. As soon as you eat ricin, done with the game. There is no drug, no one can stop you from dying. For sure you will die. Ricin is so dangerous. Nothing but automatically multi-organ failure, the person will die. And there is no antidote also. There is no drugs also, there is no medicine to identify also. As of now, there is no medicine, there is no tool to we call it as tool to identify also. Now what will the outcome? Outcome is, it is death. Outcome is death. As soon as we consume ricin, it is in some cases we can save by cleaning the complete body itself. But that happens in rarest of rare cases. But the outcome is at maximum cases death. And that's the reason it is the Chemical Weapons Convention has declared this ricin as what? Ricin as Schedule 1 chemical weapon. Chemical weapon, this should be banned, this should not be manufactured, and this should not be stored, and this should not be used at any cost. Against the humanity. But unfortunately, these doctors, though they were present in India, they were trying to kill the people. Via we call it as adding it into, we call it as the prasadams, adding it via the density populations. They were targeting majorly the highly density the areas. Normally the Mumbai, normally we call it as the places like Gujarat, normally places like we call it as the Bangalore, normally places like Delhi, all those things. They were targeting, and they were targeting to kill the human beings and create a fear in the minds of the people. And that was their intention. It is of this we call it as the doctors. And now the government has arrested, it is more than 1,500 people related to the Red Fort, the blast case. and related to them, it is Ricin also, more than 1500 people. And that more than 1500 people, they are linked to, we call it as the different areas, which include Srinagar, which include Gujarat, which includes Lucknow, which include majorly the southern areas, Hyderabad, all the things has been linked to the Red Fort bomb list. That you should be aware. That you should be aware as a part of, we call it as the Ricin part. Sir, when the Ricin part is done, now which organization or which convention deals with respect to, we call it as this chemical weapons? Now the organization we call it as Chemical Weapons Convention. Chemical Weapons Convention, is India part of this Chemical Weapons Convention? Online fast. Now is castor oil bad? No boss, castor oil is not bad. We are using it on continuous basis and we are drinking also sometimes. Yes or no? It is not bad, but this we call it as Ricin is bad. Sir, my simple question is, if I eat this castor seed, is it dangerous? If I chew, it is dangerous. If it is eat that without chewing, ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ನುಂಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಏನು ತೊಂದರೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಅದೇನಾದ್ರು ಸೀಡ್ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಆಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ ಚಟ in your body. Yes or no? That is so dangerous. Yes or no? That you should be aware. Now Chemical Weapons Convention. Now this Chemical Weapons Convention has been taken up in the year 1980s. Now this Chemical Weapons Convention started in the year 1980s, and this was being established under the organizations of, this was established under we call it as Organization for Prohibitions of Chemical Weapons Convention. This was established under the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons Convention. But is India part of this? Is India ratified this? Now when did India ratify? Now India ratified it in the year 1996. India is a member, but India is not a founding member. India ratified it in which year? 1996. But according to this convention, it is the manufacturing up of chemical weapons, storing up of stockpiling, and usage is completely what? Usage is completely banned. Especially which one is completely banned? Ricin is completely banned. Ricin is completely banned, and it is illegal to manufacture, illegal to stockpile, and illegal to transfer, and illegal to use on humans also. And that has been clarified under a convention called as Chemical Weapons Convention. Yes. Done? Okay, what done for this? Okay. Now with respect to Ricin, expect this year question on Ricin. Now with respect to Ricin, which of the following is correct? Now with respect to Ricin is derived from the seed of the Ricin communis, and is lethal even in small quantities also. Yes or no, boss? Yes. Second one, Ricin is classified as Schedule 1 chemical under the Chemical Weapons Convention due to its the extremely, we call it as, high toxicity and misuse potential also. Yes or no? Second, castor oil extracted from castor seed, it is unsafe for consumption because it contains high amount of Ricin. Yes or no? If it is containing high amount of Ricin, automatically there would have not been 1.4 billion population in India. Yes or no? It is, there would have been lesser amount of population in India because of consumption of this. Now is the answer for this. It is only 2 is correct. Only 2 is the correct. It is the third one is wrong. Castor oil is not bad. Rather, it is the extracting we call it as ricin, a protein. From we call it as the waste materials from the castor seed. It is more dangerous, and hardly it contains 1 to 5% in the castor seed. And that's also you should be aware about all those things. Now in Chemical Weapons Convention, be cautious. Now India is a signatory, and India has ratified this Chemical Weapons Convention in the year 1996. And we also brought in, we call it as an act. Act we call it as in the year 2000s also. Now in India, the chemical weapons usage, it is either by the government or by any agencies, it is purely and completely it is banned. Because using it against the human beings and violating their human rights, it is banned also. That you should be aware. Now the next topic is highly important. Now this expect a question now. Now TB question is more important, but TB is not more important, but yes. But TB is not much important, but this report is important. Now shall we see one by one? The first one, the first news here is recently the WHO has released a global TB report. Global TB report 2025 has been released. Global TB report. Now first one about global TB. The TB report, which year was? 2025. Second. Now this global TB report has been released by which organization? WHO. We call it as World Health Organization. Now when was this World Health Organization established? 1948, headquartered Geneva, Switzerland. It's a UN body. Anyways, I've discussed, this is my third time I'm discussing in the weekly current affairs. Yes or no? First one. The second one, this global TB report is released once in how many years? Once in how many years, boss? It is released once in, we call it as 1 year, and that we call it as, it's an annual report. It's an annual report. Now which takes into consideration which all things? It takes into consideration, it is the complete aspects related to what? The TB. Now complete aspects means what? First one, which country has the highest amount of cases? And that, which state also? Country and state. Second one, now which country is good with respect to? It is controlling TB, death, scanning, testing, missing the TB cases, all these things, the 360-degree, the related to TB, it is provided by whom? Provided by WHO, World Health Organization. Now, this is not important, but the data is important. Now, shall we see that one by one? Now, before that, first we'll talk about what is TB. What is TB? It is, TB means tuberculosis. TB abbreviation we call it as tuberculosis. TB. First one. Now this tuberculosis, it is caused by which pathogen? It is caused by bacteria, the virus or fungi. It is caused by bacteria, and that bacteria we call it as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is caused by, we call it as, it is caused by bacteria, and that we call it as Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Mycobacterium, very much important. Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And second one, how it is spreaded. How does it spread from one person to the other? How does it spread from one person to the other? Now, it is spread via, we call it as air droppings, via coughing, via sneezing, via nose droppings, via mouth dropping saliva, all those things. It is carried via, we call it as air. It is carried via, we call it as air. And that we call it as, it is spread via. It is spread via, how? Air. It is spread via, we call it as the air. It's an airborne bacterial infection. It's an airborne bacterial infection. Third one. Now when there is a TB, what are the different types of the symptoms can I experience? Now normally the fever, coughing, sneezing, chest pain, weakness, fatigue, all those things comes under where? Symptoms, normal symptoms. But major one is coughing is the major one. Coughing. Jasti consider TB and the normal consider madbeku. Now the fourth one we call it as, we should get tested. That's what I am saying. It is more amount of cough, it is continuously for a week. I think but most probably 80% cases you have got TB. But rarest of rare cases, in 20% cases, nothing but it has escaped. Or the majority is TB. Now fourth one, now this impacts which organs? Now there are two types of TB. One we call it as pulmonary TB and extrapulmonary TB. Pulmonary means pulmonary TB, and second one we call it as extrapulmonary TB. Pulmonary TB and second one we got what? Extrapulmonary TB. Now with respect to pulmonary TB, which impacts what? Lungs. Which impact lungs, that is called as pulmonary TB. If it is impacting the other organs, like kidney, like the heart, like majorly we call it as the pancreas, all this comes under where? Extrapulmonary TB. It can impact any organ, but majorly it impacts lungs. Majorly it impacts lungs, majorly it impacts bronchitis, the bronchioles. The majorly it impacts the lungs. And such type of TB we call it as pulmonary TB, and if it is impacting other organs we call it as extrapulmonary TB. Done, boss? Now a simple question is, can we cure TB? Can we reduce TB? It is both are possible. It is we can cure TB also. We can cure TB also. Curing TB is also possible, but it should be diagnosed at where? At the first stages, not at the last stage. It should be diagnosed at where? First stage. Now sir, now a simple question is, how to identify that it is a particular person is suffering from TB? Which is the measurement tool we have to measure TB? It is majorly we call it as dots. Now which is the dot? Dots means, dots measurement tool we call it as directly observed treatment short course. This is the major measurement tool we have. It is measurement tool we have to measure the TB. And after that we also have X-ray scanning, we also have blood test, all this it is there, but majorly we go for dots. Directly observed treatment short course. Directly observed treatment short course. Yes or no? That is majorly used with respect to we call it as the TB. This is about our first one called as the TB, and highly important one. Now we'll go for a report. Now what is that report talks about, and what does the report talks about India? Now majorly. Now India as we call it as 25% of TB cases. If it is 100 TB cases, 25 cases are present in where? India itself. First and foremost one we call it as, now India has 25% of the cases clarified by WHO tuberculosis report, TB report. WHO's TB report, first one. Sir, if that's the case, don't we have any good news with respect to TB? We have very much good news, and that good news we call it as Now the cases have reduced by what percentage? It is majorly we call it as 21% compared to 2015 and 2024 in the last 9 to 10 years. In the last 9 to 10 years, the number of cases have reduced by what? Number of cases have reduced by, we call it as 21%. Whereas the global average is what? Only 12%. This is very good news. Now compared to global one, our India we have reduced by what percentage? 2x times. We have reduced the TB cases by double the number of cases. Double the number of cases. Now per 1 lakh people, we had 237. Per every 1 lakh people, we had 237 cases in 2015. But when it comes to 2024-25, the number of cases have reduced it to 187 per 1 lakh. But don't you think it is also heavier? It's also higher. 187 per 1 lakh. Think about how many lakhs are present in India on average. And that's the reason WHO said that though with respect to reduction of TB cases it is well and good, but despite that India has how many number of cases? How many number of cases? It is 25% of TB cases. Sir, India fine. But within India, which states have the highest amount of TB cases? It is UP, Maharashtra, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh. These are the top 4, we call it as top 4 what? Top 4. It is UP as highest number of cases. Second one, Maharashtra. Third one, it is Bihar. Fourth one is Madhya Pradesh. Yes or no? Now, Karnataka does not have much of TB, but Karnataka has more of, it is HIV cases. That's a challenge. At least TB can be cured, but HIV cannot be cured. That's a challenge. Yes or no? This is about the third one. Sir, fourth one, what is the target we have at world level to eliminate TB from the world? Now the world target is 2030. The world target is 2030. But India has challenged the WHO saying that we will achieve the target by 2025, 5 years of the target. But when it is India government came into power saying that we won't take up till 2030, rather we will achieve it by 2025. But in the year 2025, it has WHO has clarified saying that it is you guys have 25% of the TB cases. How can we reduce it? That is 1/4 of the world TB cases. But despite taking at 2025, we cannot achieve it. Even by 2030 also it is little impossible to achieve. Because the number of cases is so higher that it is from 237 we have reduced it to 187. That does not mean that reducing it to some 10 or 20, it is little difficult. Yes or no? That is the world target. And with the scheme we have with respect to, we call it as the TB personalities or TB cases. With the scheme we have. Now for TB personalities, we have a scheme called as, now one is TB Mukt Bharat by 2025, 5 years ahead of the target. And second one, we have launched the initiative called as, it is TB Poshan Abhiyan. It is the TB Poshan Abhiyan, or it is also called as Nikshai Poshan Abhiyan. Now in Hindi, TB it is called as Nikshai. And such a scheme or that scheme we call it as, which one? That TB, or it is also called as Nikshai. Nikshai Poshan Abhiyan. Now under this Poshan Abhiyan, the Nikshan Poshan Abhiyan, the TB personalities are being provided with how many rupees? 1,000 rupees per month. 1,000, initially it was 500. Now recently they have increased it to 1,000 rupees for TB personalities to purchase for the nutritional capacities, to purchase different amount of nutrition, We have launched the initiative called as the Nikshay Poshan Abhiyan. Initially it was 500 the rupees. Now it has increased, or we have increased it to, we call it as the majorly. How much? It is 1,000 rupees. 1,000 rupees per month is being provided to the TB persons for purchasing up of, we got different nutrients to reduce the impact of TB. That we have launched, we call it as the 1,000 rupees has been launched here. Done. Now we'll see one by one related to data. Now with respect to the data, the first data we call it as, now India records one of the world's steepest technology decline. Now what percentage? Now we have declined by what percentage? 21%. What about the global one? Only 12%. Only we call it as 12%. First one. Second one we call it as, now majorly. Sir, how many we call it as that TB mortality we are facing? How many TB mortality? TB mortality means what? TB death. Now TB death we call it as, initially it was, we call it as 28. Now we have reduced it to 21 per 1 lakh population. Nothing but per 1 lakh it is 28 irtakkantadu. Now it has been reduced to what? 21. Now 21 people are dying, and this constitutes the one of the top 10 we call it as the deaths with respect to India. This TB has been considered as what? This has been considered as, we call it as one of the top 10. One of the, we call it as the 10 we call it as the deaths. Top 10 the deaths with respect to, we call it as TB. Highly important one. This data they will for sure ask. First one. Second one. Now with respect to, we call it as, with respect to treatment. Now treatment, now initially it was 53%. Now it has been increased to what? It is more than, we call it as more than 90%, 92%. Whereas the world average is in and around 88%. Whereas the world averages in and around what? 88%. But our treatment is what? Treatment is, we call it as 92%. Again, more than, we call it as global average. More than global average. Third one, sir, how many persons are being diagnosed? Now we have 27 lakh estimated cases of TB. In India, we have in and around 27, we call it as lakhs of TB cases. Just an estimate. Out of that estimate, how many have been diagnosed? 26 lakh has been diagnosed. We have been tested, and after testing we have provided treatment also. Now sir, now missing cases has been reduced to what? Less than 1 lakh. Missing cases has been reduced to, we call it as 1 lakh. Missing number of cases. And next one, I have already said that the treatment success is also higher with respect to India. That is 90%, whereas world average is what? 88%. After giving a treatment, they have shown a success also. Understand? I will repeat. First one. Now, what does this report talks about? Now, mainly this report has been released by which organization? WHO, World Health Organization. This report is released once every year. Now, according to the report, this clearly says that it is India has the highest number of cases. 25% of the cases are present in India. Now, how many number of cases? We have 27 lakh cases are present in India. Out of that 27 lakh cases, how many lakhs has been tested? How many lakhs has been provided treatment? How many have shown a success? How many have died? Yes or no, boss? Now, how many have TB? 27 lakh. How many people have been provided with the dots? 26 lakhs. After providing these dots, now how many have shown a good treatment? Now treatment, it is majorly, we call it as treatment success is 90%, and rest 10% is death. Hope you're getting it. This data has been clearly given by, we call it as clearly given by, it is the WHO regarding India. regarding India, and you should also be aware about the two schemes. One we got as the TB Mukt Bharat. TB Mukt Bharat, that we got by the year 2025. We won't be achieving it. We won't be achieving the TB Mukt Bharat by 2025. Obviously, we'll be extended to up till 2027 or 2030 also. But achieving is little difficult. And second one we call it as, we have launched an initiative called as the Nikshai Poshan Abhiyan. Now Nikshai Poshan Abhiyan, initially we were providing 500 rupees per individual per month for purchasing about the different nutrients. But now we have increased it to what? 1000 rupees. Under we call it as the Nikshai Poshan Abhiyan. Yes or no? Yes, done with the game. Now all this factuals you should be aware. Done? Okay. What done for this? Okay. Why second option is wrong? Okay. Both are correct. Okay. Okay, we'll see. Now India recorded it is about the WHO Global, the TB report 2025. Now India recorded a 21% decline in TB incidence between 2015 and 2024 as per the WHO's Global TB report. This is correct. Now the globe has shown what percentage? 12%. India has doubled its the thing compared to the world. Second one, India accounts for nearly 25% of global cases, and under the Pradhan Mantri TB Mukt Bharat Abhiyan, its treatment success rate in 2004 has remained below the global average. Has it remained below the global average or above the global average? That is wrong. Half correct, half wrong. Up till here it is correct. And after that, it is the treatment rate as it is more. It is whereas India's global rate is 90%. Whereas India's it is 90%, whereas globe is what? Is that the case? Which one is higher? Now I should need to replace only this. If I add a word called as above, the statement becomes right. Yes or no? It is second option is incorrect, and which of the following are the correct? It is only one is correct. Yes or no? Done? Okay. Hope it is clear. The next one we call it as CRI, Climate Risk Index. Climate Risk Index 2025. Now in the last class itself I have given you a hint. Now with respect to it, we call it as the Climate Risk Index. Now with respect to Climate Risk Index, why this was in use? Now recently Climate Risk Index, it is 2026. CRI, it's not 2025, be cautious. Now CRI, this will be up till next November. This Climate Risk Index normally, the climate summits will take place in November. November to next November, it is a year, climate year. For November 2025. Now my simple question is, why normally the sessions happens in November and December? No, it's because of winter in Kelsaila. Okay. See, not exactly that. Now, whatever the decision we take, don't you think it takes some 2 months? Now, that will come into effect from which year? 1st January 2026. In the same manner, if you are aware, even our constitutional meetings also used to take place in the month of November, December. Why? Because we will be getting 2 months to take a decision, and whatever the decision we take, that will come into effect in, it is January. Take an example of Lahore session of 1929. Now Lahore session normally it will take place, INC meetings takes place in November and December. Now that will come into effect in the month of January, that is for the next year. Yes or no? And that's the reason normally the different meetings takes place in the month of, we call it as November, December. Now that obviously will come into effect from, it is next year January. From January up till next year, December. That's the reason. Yes or no? Yes. Now the news is 2026. 2026, the climate risk index. The climate risk index has been released in where? The climate risk index has been released in, we call it as COP 30. Now 31 is also clarified now. 31 is also clarified now. COP 31 will be in Turkey, hosted by Australia. 32, Ethiopia. That at least you should be aware. Now in this we call it as climate resilient index or climate risk index. 2026 has been released in, we call it as COP 30 in a location called as Belém. In a location called as Belém. Belém it's in where? Brazil. That you should be aware. First one. Now second one sir. Now this climate, the risk index is released by, it is released by, we call it as environmental think tank. Environmental, the think tank of Germany, and that we call it as the German watch. That we call it as German watch. Now this German watch has been established in 2006, and since 2006 this climate risk index has been released every year. This is being released every year, and it has been provided to whom? The policy makers in the COP. This report they will submit it to whom? They will submit it to, we call it as the different COPs. And what is that COP now? Now normally this COP we call it as COP 30. They will give the report to the COP 30. Now sir, this climate risk index takes into consideration now which all things? Now takes into consideration, perfect. Now takes into consideration, be cautious. Now takes into consideration only the sudden factors. Takes into consideration the sudden factors, but not what? But not, it is the slow factors. The slow factors like it is sea level rise, ocean acidification, all these are not taken into consideration. Which one is taken into consideration? It is they taken into consideration sudden factors, the fast factors, volcanoes, earthquakes, seal, it is the ice melting. All these are being taken into consideration. But when they take into consideration, they also release what is the impact to economy. What is the impact to economy and what is the impact to, we call it as human beings. What is the impact to, we call it as human beings. Now in this year's report, they have clarified clearly saying that it is because of climate change, there is a loss of in and around $170 billion. Because of climate change, there is a loss of, we call it as $170 billion to the different countries of the world. $170 billion. Now how it is impacting humans? How much impact it is impacting the people? Out of some in and around 8.5 to 9 billion population, how many population are being impacted because of climate change? Now around 1 billion people are being impacted by this climate change. They have clarified saying that 1 billion population have been impacted by what? Have been impacted by, we call it as, it is climate change factors. Out of that every year 80,000 people are dying. The mortality is 80,000. Every year we are facing a death because of climate change. That is 80,000 people are dying because of, we call it as, the climate change factors. Yes or no, boss? If that's the case, now what is that specific to India? What's the rank of India? Now what is the rank of India? The rank of India is, we call it 9th. Now in the last year India was in which rank? India was in 3rd rank. Now, in the last year, India was in third rank, but it is fortunately we have reduced our impact. Fortunately, it was third rank. Now it was moved towards what? Ninth. Is it good or bad? No, it is good. And today they have released a report. Now Bureau of Indian Standards has released a report called as it is complete Himalayas comes under where? It is complete Himalayas comes under very high risk zone, zone 5. Today they have released a report. Now again, because of what? Climate change. Because of climate change, because of we call it as changing weather and climatic conditions, we are facing huge number of challenge. And because of all those things, even India is under very high risk. That we call it as under 9th position. Which is the first rank? It is first rank, we call it as Dominica Republic. It is Dominica Republic. All these are island countries majorly. Dominica, Honduras, followed by Haiti, followed by Grenada, Philippines, Bahamas, Nicaragua. All these are smaller countries except India. Yes or no? That's the major risk we are facing with respect to climate change also. Done? This we call it as the climate risk index. Now while discussing about climate risk index, we have discussed about why it was in use. Now it is released by, it is since which year. Now it takes into consideration which all things, economic and human factors. Now under economic factors, 170 billion deaths, highlights of this year's report, and along with that, specific to India also, we have discussed. Yes or no? Yes, Caribbean Islands also, zone 5, exactly yes. Exactly Rakesh, exactly Iram. 9, COP 30 since 2006, German watch. Yeah, normally they go for discussion in the end of the year, now to get a resolution for the new year. That's the major reason for that. Done? Okay, what's done for this? Okay. Now, with reference to climate risk index, consider following statements. The climate risk index is released annually by German watch and measure the human and economic impact of the extreme weather events. Yes. Second one, the CRI includes both rapid. Now, both itself is wrong. It takes into consideration sudden but not the slow movements. Second is incorrect. Third one, India has been ranked as the third globally in the CRI 2016 as one of the most affected countries by big extreme weather, and it is events between 2024 and 1995. Now, if it was 2025 report, it was correct, but we are talking about 26. If that's the case, now India has been migrated to third to ninth. In the year we call it as 2026. Is it good or bad? Moving from third to ninth, is it good or bad? It is good. Yes or no? It is in good things, going up is good. In bad things, going down is good. It is bad. It is climate risk index. It is bad. Next one, we call it as the polio virus. The wild polio virus. Why this wild polio virus was in use? Now first one normally. Now normally be it any country, randomly they will go for it is sewage testing. Normally they will collect it is the water from, we call it as, now if it is Bangalore, we'll take an evidence from BWSSB. We'll take 1 liter and we'll go for sampling. Now which all type of diseases are present in a particular city? Now this happens on continuous weekly basis and continuous monthly basis also. We'll take a sewage water, we'll test. In the same manner, even Germany have gone for it is sewage testing, but in a sewage testing, we got an evidence of, we call it as the polio virus. Now my simple one is, now if there is a virus which is present in the sewage, does it mean that that city is having a cases of virus? or it is that viruses were being carried from one region to the other. What does it mean? Nothing that it is I'll take a sewage from Chandralayot and I'll test it to the laboratory. Now in this Chandralayot sewage water, we got an evidence saying that there is a huge amount of polio virus. What does it clarify? Does it clarify that it is Chandralayot is having huge amount of polio? Or sometimes it can be a possibility that it is the water from it is Vijayanagar can also have, it has come to, it is Chandralayot also. Two possibilities are, can happen. One can be, it is number of cases have increased in a particular region, or it can be the movement of virus from one area to the other. And there are two possibilities. Now, if it is two possibilities, we need to go for number of cases. Does Germany has number of cases or vaccination is good? Now all this we need to test now. When we get a virus, we need to go for cross-testing among the humans also. That has been, see this detection of wild polio viruses, we call it as grey wastewater. Grey wastewater means sewage. In which country? Germany. Yes, that we'll see one by one. Now first one we call it as, what is polio, boss? What is polio? Now polio, it's a viral borne disease. First one, it is a viral borne disease. It is caused by a polio virus. It's a viral borne disease. It is caused by, we call it as poliomyelitis or polio virus in general. Poliomyelitis or polio virus in general. Done? Polio virus in general, first one. The second one. Now this polio virus spreads from one to other. In what manner? Spreads from one human being to other. In what manner? Now majorly it spreads via water, food, and we call it as sanitation. It spreads via three important routes. One is water, second one can be via the food, and second one we call it as sanitation, using the same toilets. Sanitation. And that's the reason we normally recommend that don't use much of the public, it is the toilets. Because the cases are spreading from the toilets to the common bathrooms is more. It is the sanitation. The food, and we call it as the water. Second. The third one, now what are we call it as the symptoms and impacts. Now if it is a polio virus in a particular individual's body, now what will be the symptoms? The paralysis of the different body parts. Paralysis. And second one we call it as, it impacts the nervous system. It impacts the different nervous system. The different nervous system, it can be head, it can be the legs, it can be hands, it can be the main body part, or it can be anything. It impacts the different, we call it as the nervous systems. Third. Fourth one, do we have a treatment for this? Do we have a treatment? There is only one treatment called as vaccine. Now vaccine is only a preventable one. It is preventable one, but is this polio? Can it cure? Can we cure it? No. Can we cure it? No cure. But providing with, we call it as the polio vaccine. Polio vaccine, we can control the impact and we can control the spread also. That does not mean that can be cured. It cannot be cured. Once a polio, it is lifetime of polio. You cannot cure it. Third, now with respect to, we call it as, there are two types of the polio. One we call it as the wild polio. Directly virus impacts. and that we call it as wild polio. Now this wild polio, it is present as of now only in two countries, one in Afghanistan and Pakistan, present only in two countries. But in many other countries, there is a spread of polio via the vaccine, and that polio we call it as the vaccine induced polio. That we call it as what? Vaccine induced, we call it as the polio. From vaccine we will be getting a polio, because the vaccine have contaminated. Recently we have seen a cases, we call it as, it is polio contaminated vaccine also, or I can say the vaccine has been infected with the virus, major in UP. Now is India it has eliminated polio? Now India eliminated polio in which year? In the year 2013 itself. In the year 13-14, it is India eliminated polio. Now does elimination and eradication, does it means that zero cases? No boss. It only means that it is minimal number of cases. It only means that minimal number of cases. We have polio cases in India, but the cases of spread and the case of new cases and the cases of death is also has come down. And that cases we call it as, it is India has eliminated polio in which year? In the year 13-14, and that we call it as polio Mukt Bharat also we have achieved. It is majorly we call it as. Now we also have vaccination, oral polio vaccination. Majorly we provide as a part of, we call it as Mission Indradhanush to the children, one who are less than, we call it as the majorly less than 2 years or sometimes less than 5 years also. Less than the 5 years also we will be providing it with what? Providing it with, we call it as the polio. Now be cautious. Now in Germany we have identified it is the wild polio after 15 years. After 15 years, but this is a serious case. But fortunately in Germany, after getting an evidence, we did not get any, we call it as the new number of cases. This only shows that it is the virus have come from some other state or some other city rather than the spread in a local Germany. And wild polio, it is present only in which all countries? Afghanistan and Pakistan. And this is all about, we call it as the polio. This is all about the polio. Yes. Mission Indradhanush, India polio free by 2013-14. We have done it. Done? Okay, what done for this? Okay. Now, the wild polio type 1 remains endemic only to Afghanistan and Pakistan, while WP, V2 and V3, wild polio virus 2 and 3 have been eradicated globally. Yes, perfect. First one is correct. The recent detection of WPV1, wild polio virus 1 in Germany indicate a local outbreak. Does it mean local outbreak? Now, if it is a local outbreak, there is no new cases. Because the vaccine coverage in Germany is also good. It is local outbreak causing multiple polio cases. There is no multiple cases among children. In the other case, A is correct and R is false. Option C. Assertion is correct and the reasoning is wrong. And this we call it as the option C is correct. Yes or no, boss? No. The next one we call it as, it is Garuda 25. Garuda 25 means 2025. Now my simple question is, now which is this edition? The 8th edition of bilateral, we call it as what? Bilateral air-to-air exercise between India and France. India and the France. First one. The first one about this we call it as the military exercise. This military exercise started in the year 2003. This military exercise started in the year 2003 between which two countries? It's a bilateral military exercise between the Air Force of India and Air Force of France. Started in which year? 2003. Nothing but it's a, we call it as the military exercise between India and we call it as what? India and France. India and France. Sir, if it is a military exercise, normally what will they do? What will they do? Normally if it is a military exercise, automatically they will train among each other. They will exchange informations. They will train among the, it is equal forces among the known knowledges. And the fourth one, it is the security sharing, friendliness between the two countries. All this will take place with respect to we call it as Garuda. Now in this Garuda, now which military aircraft has been showcased? Which military aircraft has been showcased? Rafale. Now Rafale from we call it as France, and from India. From India we call it as, majorly we call it as Sukhoi has been showcased. Sukhoi is from Russia, replacing MiG-21. The MiG-21 recently replaced after 62 years of we call it as functionality. Sukhoi, now the Sukhoi will replace the Rafale. Now Rafale will get replaced by we call it as Tejas LCA. LCA Tejas. All those were in news, but just understand. Now Rafale and the Sukhoi was being we call it as the showcase as a part of we call it as military agreement between the, or military exchange between we call it as the exercise, the Garuda between India and France. This is air. Now which is the naval exercise we have between we call it as France and India? Now which is the army exercise we have between we call it as the India and we call it as the France. Perfect. It is with respect to navy. With respect to navy we call it as Varuna. With respect to army we call it as Shakti. Yes or no, boss? Done. This is about our majorly with respect to our the first things. Now little bit information about France. About France. Fast. Some 10 points. It is first one we call it as COP21. Now COP21 in which year? 2015 took place in where? Now took place in we call it as the Paris. Took place in Paris, France. Highly important COPs. Second one we call it as, now we established International Solar Alliance between whom? Between India and France. Recently India has been elected as president to ISA and France has been elected as what? Vice president to we call it as International Solar Alliance. Where is this International Solar Alliance headquartered? Gurugram, Haryana, India. Gurugram, Haryana, India. Now recently Narendra Modi has inaugurated the UPI and RuPay card in France. UPI, what UPI means? Unified Payment Interface, and RuPay card has been inaugurated at where? The RuPay card has been inaugurated at we call it as the Paris, France. Fourth. The fourth one, it is majorly the Rafale. Okay, Rafale. Now Mirage is from USA, Mirage 2000. Now majorly we are buying this Rafale. Now Rafale is from which country? The France. We have signed to purchase more than 60 plus. More than 60 plus from where? The France. And the next one we call it as majorly with respect to the France. Now where is the headquarters of UNESCO? The Paris, France. UNESCO headquarters. And next one, where is the headquarters of Interpol? Lyon, France. Lyon, the France, exactly. Lyon, the France. Now all these things are a part of, we call it as the France related one. Now little bit military exercises. Between different countries. First one we call it as, the first one, major one, Sri Lanka's. Fast. It is Slinex, and we call it as Mitra Shakti. Nothing to discuss, I won't discuss in the next week. Mitra Shakti. Second one, Maldives, Ecoverin. Next one, with respect to USA, it is Yudhabhyas, Vajraprahar, red flag, tiger trump. 4. Vajraprahar, tiger trump, red flag, Yudhabhyas. It is the cop also. The next one with respect to, it is Russia, Indra. With respect to Japan, Dharma Guardian, Jimex. Yes or no? Yes. Now majorly we call it as Thailand, Maitri. Thailand it is, we call it as Maitri. Yes. At least some recent one you should know. Now, solve this. Yes, sir. That's the reason I said Mitra Shakti. Nothing on next wala kelbedi. Nothing to discuss except a country. Done? Okay. Are done with this? Now with reference to the Indian Air Force participation in exercise Garuda 25, consider the following statements. It's a bilateral exercise conducted between India and France to enhance operational interoperability and interaction. Correct. The exercise includes naval, obviously no. For naval we have a Varuna. With India and France, if that's the case, second option is wrong. Which is incorrect? 2 is incorrect. Yes. Now this is all for this week. Yes, I hope there is no doubts. Online, I hope you guys enjoyed. If yes, just give a like before leaving. Okay. Done. This is all for the today. Thank you. See you all next week. Done? Yes. Online, thank you. Yes, yes. Hope you guys enjoy the class. Enjoy my teacher. Just give a like and share among your friends. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you online. Thank you Ira. Thank you Sneha. Thank you Rakesh. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. See you all next week with the new topics. Done. Yes, yes. Online, thank you. PTS, thank you very much.